you had brought something up to me, which I thought was great, and it was this thought about organizational culture, because it's something that has we're starting to hear more and more about it, like that phrase, organizational culture, the importance of organizational culture. And I wanted you to just kind of open up a little bit about like what was on your mind or what got you thinking about this.
Right. It was a mix of two things, I will be honest. The first thing was if you're on the interwebs, on the Airman NCO page, on any subreddit about the Air Force, you're seeing a lot of comments about units changing patches, units changing names, just the mantras that entire wings are pushing out, which all come from a place of value more than likely. But I really thought back to the summit where we're hearing the Vice Chief of Staff talk about re-optimizing for great power competition, which is just this thought of the Air Force structure as we know it's going to change, which means new organizations will activate, organizations might deactivate, rename, rebrand, whatever. But with that means that they're going to have to form their own culture. And it made me think, especially seeing the post about Tinker Strong, just how a mandated culture versus an adopted culture might come off from the workforce. So, Mike, how would you define those two terms, or how do you interpret them?
No, that's a good question. Because there's certainly a difference between the two, and I'm always a person that, like, if we're gonna have conversations, about something, like let's break down what these terms actually mean. So, essentially, like if I was to make a short version of this, mandated culture is when the values, the behaviors, and like the norms of an organization are enforced from the top down. It's like having a rule book that everyone must follow, regardless of whether or not they genuinely connect with it. Whereas like adopted culture, on the other hand, like develops naturally from the ground up. It's shaped by like the people of that office, that team, that organization, they who've embraced like those shared values and behaviors because they genuinely believe in them. In short, a mandated culture just feels like something you have to do, while an adopted culture is something you want to be a part of. Right. So like that's really the difference between the two. But like honestly, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but in regards to like how I feel about both, um, you would think that it's obvious to go the route of the adopted culture, but genuinely there are pros and cons to both. And I believe that this conversation, this talk is important because the way culture is shaped can absolutely make or break a team, an organization, or in the case of like the military, a unit. So like I think this is a super important convo to have, but those are the two differences between the two.
Oh yeah, no, and it's critical because it might seem black or white, but it's not.
Right,
It's super gray,
right.
super gray, and there gets to be a point in time where a mandated culture might become the adopted culture,
Mm,
not because leadership's continuously pushing it down so people follow, but over time as people move and apply for new jobs and leave old jobs, they will gravitate towards organizations that might align with their values.
mm.
And so over time, what seems mandated now might be adopted 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now, just due to the cycle of people entering and leaving from the workforce.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so
Matter of fact, let's start here. Like, which one do we want to focus on first? We want to focus on mandated culture or adopted culture?
let's go mandate.
Mandated? Okay, let's
Oh
talk
yeah.
mandated culture. Yeah, for sure. Because I mentioned that they're pros and cons really to both. Naturally, I just said that with adopted culture, it's something that you're buying into, whereas like mandate is something that's being put on you, and that's naturally the first con that's going to come up, right? And it's legitimate. It's gonna come off like the best way that I've put it is surface level compliance, right? People might follow the rules only because they feel like they have to, which doesn't always lead to true what's the way I want to put it? Like it doesn't always lead to true like cultural transformation, right? And when you get that, people are going to be at times resistant to change, because mandated culture can often feel forced, and it can lead to pushback or resentment from people on your team who feel like their voices aren't really heard. um and I mean, and then just from that, I mean, then you're talking about a lack of authenticity, because then you may have people within your office, your team, that feel disconnected from your culture if they don't genuinely believe in it.
Oh yeah.
If that makes sense. So like, just naturally, like, those are just a few like cons that come to my mind. um and I wanted to see like if there were any particular pros or cons about mandated that stand out to you.
For me, pros really come from a place of best practices shining through.
Mm.
So sometimes this relationship between mandated and adopted culture goes hand in hand, because one thing that might be adopted by an individual, say they see something outstanding in the workplace that they're like, yes, I want everyone to do that from now on. Eventually they might mandate it. And that just might come from a place of wanting people to use the same technique that's worked. Like the example I love to use is that military leaders are usually formed in the first, I'd say, 5 years of their career. They will learn over time, but the foundation is usually there. Usually they don't completely scrap it as they go up in rank. There is some truth to what they've experienced. And so whenever they are SELs, commanders, chiefs, colonels, and above, things they picked up over time that they've adopted when they enter an organization might become mandated. That's not bad, because I will say change is not bad. Some people might think it's a little apprehensive and might be a little hesitant to shake up the status quo. But some of those good things that they've experienced over 10, 15, 30 years are just things they might mandate over time. But like everything, you have to take a pause and have a conversation to figure out where it's coming from.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that you said that, because I think that's something that is a clear pro to mandated culture. Like, is that clear, expectation, almost, and that like quick implementation of something. So you gave the example of like, in case like we saw something that someone's doing, we wanted to keep implementing it or use that as a future thing. I think when it's mandated, changes happen faster, um, or just quickly, since they're enforced from the top. Whereas with adopted culture, it's not always going to happen as quickly, because normally those those type of norms uh, have to be not approved, but they have to be accepted. Like, you have to have buy-in from like everyone for that thing to become a norm. So a pro of the mandated is like, hey, this is the way we're moving forward. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I think that's a pro in some instances, depending on what's being asked. And then when stuff like that happens, you have, which happens a lot in the military, you have uniform standards. Like,
Yeah,
it helps to ensure that like there's a standard that's set across the board, whether that's like in values or behaviors. And honestly, that's useful, like especially when you're trying to keep a consistent, like cohesive brand. Like, that's super helpful. So I think that can be a pro as well. But I think a lot of times when people talk about mandated culture, they only talk about like the cons. But I think it is important for us to like kind of dip into both. But let's hop into adopted culture. Like, what comes to your mind with adopted, whether pro or con?
I'd say my favorite thought of adopted culture is when you get a new boss outside looking in, and the first thing they ask is like, what is the norm? Whether that is like, what is our unit's motto? What is the unit chant? What is like insert war cry, whatever you want to call it. Because that's showing that they're not just saying like, hey, what I say goes, but instead they're wondering what's already being done across the organization. And when someone can answer clearly what that is, the biggest pro is that sometimes it's from the outside looking in, you're prompted for what the answer is. But when they give the clear answer across like the 15 or 20 people you ask, you know the culture's strong. That I'd say that's the biggest pro, is that when you have a good culture that was adopted and formed over time, um, usually it's a pretty healthy sign of your organization moving in the right direction, or at
Yeah.
least the same direction, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's
on
true.
the on the contrary, though, that can also be the con. Sometimes you hear something that's really not where it should. And when everyone's doing it or everyone is on board, you're going to be faced with a lot of resistance if you have to change.
No, that's true. Like, because you're really talking about like that misalignment. Like, there's the potential of that, especially if things aren't guided properly. Like that organic development of culture might go astray from whatever that organization or team's core mission or objectives are. But I also like that you talked about as far as like a pro being like that that growth, that sustained growth, really what you're talking about is a culture. Because a culture that's naturally adopted is more sustainable over time. Like it just is. And as it grows and evolves with the people, like, or it will evolve with the people who embody it. And so I view that as a pro. I view, just honestly, when we talk about adopted, I just think authenticity is a pro within adopted culture anyway, because the essentially the culture reflects the genuine values of the people in the organization. And when that happens, man, like you're just naturally going to have trust. Like with me and my teams, like I know, like when I know my people and they understand me and expectations are clear and they're set, and those are expectations set like amongst ourselves and how we're going to get things done, like you naturally just have trust and camaraderie. So for me, like adopted culture definitely has that as a pro. And then I'm willing to say that when that's happening, you're going to have more engagement too, if that makes sense. Like if people are more bought in, then naturally they're gonna be more committed to want to be active within your team, within your unit, when things happen. Whereas with, I know you've seen it before, when something comes down and it's mandated, and everyone's just kind of looking at each other like, I don't want to be here, you don't want to be here, or they're making these changes, we don't agree with any of these changes. So they're gonna do it, they're gonna get it done, but they're gonna do it at their pace because they know this ain't due to the 30th, so I'm gonna get it to them on the 29th in the day. Because they really don't believe in the change that's happening, or they don't believe in the new mandate or whatever it might be.